Ever feel like you're kind of stuck in a rut when you're trying to learn something new? Like you're putting in the effort, but it's just not clicking.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Totally. So today we're going to dive into something super intriguing: learning styles. Because let's face it, figuring out how you learn best, that's a game changer.
It really is. And for the longest time, people thought, okay, you're either a visual learner or you're an auditory learner. End of story. But turns out it's not that simple.
So are you saying it's less about fitting into one specific category and more about like finding the right mix that works for each person?
Exactly. It's like, what's your own personal recipe for learning success?
Speaking of recipes, get this. We found out that 87%, that's a whopping majority of people, are actually what's called multimodal learners, meaning they naturally lean towards a blend of different learning styles. Pretty cool, huh?
It is. And chances are, if you're listening to this right now, you fall into that category too.
So for those of us who might be new to this whole thing, what exactly does multimodal learning even mean?
So multimodal learning basically means you're using multiple ways of learning at the same time. Like
Okay.
instead of just reading a textbook, which might be great for visual learners, you might also listen to a podcast on that same topic, right? Engaging those auditory senses. And then maybe you even try explaining the concept to a friend, which brings in a more kinesthetic, hands-on element.
Wow, so it's like a total sensory experience. And wouldn't you say that kind of approach makes us way more active in our learning instead of just passively soaking it all in?
You got it. And the best part is, it's super personalized. Let's say, for example, you learn best in a quiet environment, but you're also someone who can't seem to sit still.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel that.
Well, you might find that incorporating some subtle movement into your routine, like using a fidget toy or taking quick walking breaks, can make a world of difference.
It's all about finding that sweet spot, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about mixing and matching learning styles, but isn't there also something to be said for how our brains actually process information? Like, it's not just about what senses we're using.
You're totally right. One of the key differences is how we approach learning sequentially versus globally.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for us.
So picture this. You're starting a new project.
Yeah.
Someone with a more sequential learning style, they're going to prefer taking it step by step, like going through each stage in order, building their understanding gradually.
I can totally relate to that. I like having a clear structure, knowing what's coming next.
Right. Now, someone with a more global learning style, they're going to be more comfortable jumping around a bit, getting a sense of the big picture first, maybe even skimming ahead or flipping to the back of the book before diving into the nitty-gritty.
It's almost like they're putting together a puzzle, starting with the edges and then filling in the center. And neither way is better than the other, right? They're just different approaches.
Exactly. The key is recognizing those patterns in ourselves and, appreciating the different ways people learn.
This is already making so much sense. But how can we actually use this knowledge to become better learners? Like, how can we take this information and actually apply it?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into some practical tips and examples. And I think a good place to start might be with a learning style that I have a feeling might resonate with you, especially given your desire to learn things quickly, but also thoroughly.
Yeah.
The naturalist learner.
Ooh, naturalist learner. Now, that's one I haven't heard before. Tell me more.
Okay, so naturalist learners, they're kind of fascinating. As you might guess from the name, they've got this knack for really connecting with nature. They're the ones who can spot those patterns, categorize information like it's second nature, and just get how everything's interconnected, those ecosystems, living systems, you name it.
Now that you mention it, it makes total sense that someone who's drawn to nature would be a great learner. When you think about it, nature's all about patterns and connections. It's like this intricate dance, right? The way a bee pollinates a flower or how entire ecosystems find this delicate balance. It's pretty amazing.
It really is. And the cool part is those skills, they aren't limited to just the natural world. Naturalist learners can take those same principles, that pattern recognition, the categorization, and apply them to pretty much anything. So we're talking understanding complex systems, figuring out new tech, even just navigating social dynamics. That's where they really shine.
So if I'm someone who loves finding those connections, those patterns, always looking at the big picture, chances are I might have a strong naturalist learning style.
You're catching on quick. And here's another thing that might resonate with you, especially since you're all about learning quickly and thoroughly. Naturalist learners, they often do best when they've got space to explore, experiment, make their own connections. They're naturally curious. those folks. Hands-on experiences, that's their jam.
That makes so much sense. It's like spending time outdoors, really observing, interacting with nature. You're going to get a much deeper understanding than if you were just reading about it in some book.
100%.
Mm.
And that actually brings us to another powerful combo of learning styles, kinesthetic and visual.
Okay, so we're talking about people who learn by doing and those who are all about visual aids. That sounds like a pretty dynamic duo to me.
Absolutely. Imagine this. Instead of just passively watching someone show you how to do something or reading about it, you're actually in the driver's seat. You're using your hands, manipulating things, seeing the concepts come to life right before your eyes.
That reminds me of something we came across in our research. It was this really cool program designed to teach kids about physics, but they were using these interactive animations. So the kids weren't just seeing like the laws of motion on a screen. They were actually getting to play with virtual objects, changing the variables and seeing what happened. Talk about making learning fun.
Right. And what's so brilliant about that kinesthetic and visual combo is it's tapping into multiple senses. That creates a much richer, memorable experience. It's like the difference between just reading a recipe and actually rolling up your sleeves and baking the cake.
Now that's an analogy I can get behind. And I bet that kind of hands-on multisensory learning, it really sticks with you. It's not just information going in one ear and out the other.
You nailed it. When we use multiple senses, we're creating these stronger connections in our brains. And that means better comprehension and better retention.
So it's not always about having the latest gadgets or fancy tech either, right? Even something as simple as drawing diagrams while you're studying, making flashcards, building a model, those can be super effective for both visual and kinesthetic learners.
100% agree. It's about finding what works for you, what brings the material to life. Don't be afraid to experiment a bit.
Experimentation, I love that. It's like we're all scientists in our own little learning labs, right? Trying different things, seeing what sticks.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the more we experiment, the more we learn about what works best for us. It's easy to get caught up in those labels like, oh, I'm a visual learner or I'm a kinesthetic learner, but it's usually more nuanced than that.
For sure.
We've got a whole bunch of learning styles we can tap into. The real magic happens when we embrace that, that complexity.
Totally. We're like a unique blend of all these different styles, each of us with our own strengths and preferences.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into learning styles, what's the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Ooh, that's a great question. If there's one thing I'd love for them to remember, it's that understanding how you learn best, it's a journey. It's not about fitting into a certain box or limiting yourself to one approach.
It's about giving yourself permission to explore, try new things, and really figure out what lights you up when it comes to learning.
Beautifully said. So, to our listener out there, here's a little challenge for you. Now that you've explored all these different styles with us, multimodal learning, the power of being a naturalist learner, kinesthetic and visual learning, all that good stuff, what's one thing you're going to try differently in your own learning journey?
Maybe it's bringing more movement into your study sessions, experimenting with visual aids, or finding ways to make it more hands-on. There are so many possibilities out there.
The most important thing is to have fun with it. Learning should be an adventure, not a chore, right?
Couldn't agree more. Keep those learning lights shining bright.
And remember, the most fascinating discoveries are often the ones we make about ourselves.